First one to be friend taking advantage a good friend is a sin. Okay? The last one is a surprise. It's a real good one. Did you hear this? It's real good. Very, very good sermon. Here goes.
You know, every meaningful relationship we have, it really starts as a gift, a potential source of strength and joy. And our focus material for today, it describes friendship as something more than just a social contract. It calls it a covenant.
That's a powerful word. A covenant.
It is. It's a bond that's supposed to be built on trust, on loyalty, and just genuine love. I mean, if you have a friend who consistently shows up for you, you know exactly how invaluable that security is.
It's absolutely foundational.
Yeah.
And in the context of our sources, it's seen as something divinely established, you know?
Right.
But, and this is the hard part, we have to be honest and face the reality that these precious covenants, they often get corrupted. When selfish ambition or personal gain starts to replace that genuine affection, the friendship doesn't just fizzle out, it breaks down completely.
And that breaking, from what we've been examining, that's where friendship actually turns into sin. This isn't just about, hurt feelings or people drifting apart. The sources make it absolutely clear that the Bible treats the exploitation of a friend, the manipulation, the misuse, as a severe offense.
It does. It defines those actions as sin, and it promises definitive judgment against them.
So that's our mission for this deep dive.
Yes. We really need to take a serious look at this high biblical standard. We have to define what it means to take advantage, diagnose the heart issues that drive this behavior, and critically understand the role of divine justice.
It's a tough conversation, for sure.
It is, but it's a necessary one if we want a relationship to have any kind of true honor.
Okay, so let's unpack that definition right away. When we say taking advantage, that phrase can mean a lot of different things in just, normal conversation. What's the precise, strong language that the sources use?
The language is surprisingly sharp. It's uncompromising. The Bible uses terms that equate this act directly with moral theft, with oppression. We're talking about behavior described as cheat, defraud, oppress, and betray.
Those are not gentle words.
Not at all. They describe actively benefiting yourself at the expense of someone you've, in essence, promised to protect and honor.
That immediately raises the stakes. We're not talking about accidentally hurting someone's feelings. This is calculated.
Precisely. You can go all the way back to the Old Testament standard in Leviticus. It says, "You shall not cheat your neighbor nor rob him." The sources interpret this very broadly.
So taking advantage of a friend, whether it's financially or using them for social climbing.
Or leveraging emotional secrets they told you in confidence. All of it falls under cheating. The standard is honor, honesty, fairness in all your dealings.
And there's a New Testament text that makes this even more explicit, right? Specifically within the Christian community.
Yes, 1 Thessalonians is probably the most direct warning we have. It says that no one should take advantage of and defraud his brother or sister in any matter.
Any matter.
Any matter. And then it gives the reason. Because the Lord is the avenger of all such.
We have to come back to that word avenger.
We do. But think about the power of that statement. It's a specific, direct prohibition against cheating someone with whom you share a deep trust.
So the implication is just massive. Trust is paramount. If a relationship is based on what I can get from you, it's already failed the test of fairness.
Exactly. And the thing is, the deepest wounds don't come from strangers. They come from those you invited into your inner circle. The sources really emphasize the unique pain of that betrayal.
And we see that pattern so tragically in the historical examples in the material.
Absolutely. I mean, look at King David's anguish in the Psalms. He says, "Even my own familiar friend in whom I trusted has lifted up his heel against me."
Lifted up his heel? That's so violent.
It's not passive, is it? It suggests a contemptuous kick from someone you welcomed, someone you shared a meal with. It speaks to the sheer trauma of having your trust shattered by the person you relied on.
And then, of course, the most profound example, Christ himself. Judas.
Correct. That narrative is there to show that this kind of betrayal is intrinsically evil. It's universally condemned by God. And if even the Son of God experienced that deep personal misuse, it validates the pain of anyone who has been exploited by a friend.
So let's get to the root of it. If friendship is supposed to be this sacred covenant, What is the spirit behind the behavior that drives people to break it so violently? What are the heart issues?
This is where the analysis really becomes a spiritual diagnosis.
Mhm.
The material is unequivocal.
Mm.
Exploitation starts as a heart problem. It's when selfishness has displaced love and the whole relationship just becomes transactional.
What are the main motives that fuel that?
The list the sources give revolves around these core internal sins: selfish ambition, greed, and pride.
Mm.
When those are the dominant forces, a person sees other people not as valuable individuals, but as means to an end. They use manipulation, they treat people like tools.
Can you give us an example of how that selfish ambition might play out?
Sure, let's say someone keeps up a friendship only because that friend has access to a powerful network. Or maybe they have a unique skill, a resource. The exploiter will invest just enough time, just enough affection to keep that utility high.
But the minute the friend loses that resource,
They vanish because the relationship was never based on love. It was based on what they could get.
Yeah.
That lack of love, that deep ungratefulness for the person themselves, that's what God condemns.
so the motive itself is the sin, even if the worst action hasn't fully happened yet.
Motive is everything. The Apostle Paul draws a really hard line on this in Philippians. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit. It's all about esteeming others better than yourself. God hates false motives and false friendships, that whole facade of closeness that's just covering a self-serving agenda.
Okay, so if the offense is that severe, let's talk consequences. How seriously does the source material say God takes the exploitation of a friend?
This might be the most serious point in our entire deep dive. The sources stress that God watches very, very closely how people treat their friends. And when that trust is deliberately misused, the Lord takes it personally,
Personally, why?
because the act undermines the very foundation of righteous human community, which he established. He doesn't just passively observe this stuff, he intervenes.
Which brings us back to that phrase from 1 Thessalonians, the Lord is the avenger. What does that actually mean theologically for God to be the avenger?
It means the exploiter is no longer just dealing with the person they hurt. They are dealing with God himself.
Oh.
The phrase implies that God reserves the right to seek justice on behalf of the injured party. When God says, if you take advantage of someone, I will deal with you myself, that is a terrifying warning. God becomes the active prosecutor and the judge.
That completely changes things for the person who was betrayed then. It frees them from that burden of trying to get revenge or balance the scales themselves.
Exactly. God steps in as the ultimate defender. We see it in Proverbs too. Do not rob the poor, for the Lord will plead their cause. The victim's cause becomes God's cause. So the clear takeaway is that while humans might fail to hold people accountable, ultimately, no one gets away with it. Accountability is guaranteed.
That is a very stable foundation for a victim to stand on. Okay, let's shift to the positive contrast now. If exploitation is the dark side, what's the bright standard for righteous relationships? What should a true friendship look like?
It has to look like self-sacrifice and honor and fairness. The foundation is always the golden rule, right? From Matthew. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Right.
That simple rule shifts the entire focus from taking to giving. If you genuinely don't want to be used or betrayed, well, you have to apply that exact same standard to every person you interact with.
So we move beyond just avoiding sin and into actively practicing love.
We do. Love, by its very nature, prefers others over self. Paul writes in Romans to be kindly affectionate, in honor giving preference to one another. A friendship rooted in honor elevates the other person, their needs, their dignity, above your own immediate desires. It's the polar opposite of selfish ambition.
And the absolute pinnacle of this, the ultimate model, is Christ himself.
He is. His definition of friendship isn't just about sharing time, potential sacrifice. The definitive text is no one than to lay down one's life for his friends.
Lay down one's life.
True friends are givers to the point of self-denial. They don't take advantage. They are the advantage for the other person. They love at all times, as Proverbs says, not just when it's convenient or when they can get something out of it.
That is such a staggering contrast. Okay, let's pivot back to the listener who might be carrying the or used by a friend they trusted. How do you move forward from that without becoming bitter?
This is such a critical, compassionate part of the source material. The first step is recognizing that Jesus is the perfect guide here. He knows the depth of that specific pain. So the primary advice is to actively not to become bitter.
Which is easier said than done.
Oh, of course. It means that pain and all the emotional energy tied to it must be deliberately surrendered to God. because bitterness is a poison that hurts you, the victim, far more than it ever hurts the perpetrator.
So you surrender the pain. What about the relationship? Forgiveness is necessary, but sometimes the other person is still around, still capable of doing more damage.
And that's where you have to set boundaries. Forgiveness is mandatory, yes. It's releasing the person from the debt they owe you. But forgiveness does not mean the relationship must continue as it was.
Right. It doesn't mean you have to enable more manipulation.
Exactly. Boundaries are essential self-protection. And sometimes a strong boundary is the most loving thing you could do for yourself and maybe even for them, because it forces accountability.
So forgive the person, establish clear boundaries, and then the final step is trusting in that divine justice we talked about.
Absolutely. The sources strongly advise, let God deal with the person. Because he is the avenger, you are freed from that need to seek vengeance. You can redirect that energy towards your own healing and restoration.
And the promise ultimately is that healing is possible, that trust can be rebuilt, even if it's not with the person who broke it.
That is the promise of restoration. Jesus understands broken trust completely. He was followed by people who only wanted miracles, betrayed by one of his closest friends. He promises to protect the victim, to restore their sense of self-worth, and to lead them toward genuine righteous friendships that reflect his kind of sacrificial love.
So this deep dive has really underscored how serious this is. Taking advantage of a friend. It breaks a sacred covenant, it reflects deep heart problems, and it actively invites divine judgment.
It really does. It destroys trust, it wounds the soul, and it reveals an attitude that is the complete opposite of love. But God is faithful to defend the victim, and he assures accountability for the exploiter. The standard is high, but that promise of restoration is sure.
And the encouragement here is that we're not left defenseless. We're called to seek discernment, to seek healing, and the strength to operate in genuine love, knowing that God can restore what was broken.
It all comes back to motive. You know, the world constantly pushes this transactional view. What can you get from this? But true love, the love modeled by Christ, asks, what can I give for you? And that one contrast determines the integrity of every single friendship we have.
So here is the provocative thought we want to leave you with today. Reflect on that clear contrast between the world's transactional view of relationships, which so often leads to exploitation, even subtle exploitation, and the challenging, self-sacrificial love that Christ modeled. What specific practical steps can you take today to ensure that every relationship in your life, especially those friendships where trust is highest, truly honors that covenant and is absolutely free from any selfish motive? Just examine the way you treat the people who trust you the most.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into some dense, but really compelling theological material. It's all centered on this powerful, recurring biblical idea, spiritual displacement.
Yeah, or as our source material actually calls it, deportation.
Exactly, deportation.
And the source argues that this whole theme, being carried away, captivity, exile, it isn't just a series of random historical misfortunes for ancient Israel.
No.
It's actually a central part of the architecture. It's woven through the entire story of the Bible from Genesis all the way to the end.
And our mission for this deep dive is to pull out the main theological argument here.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that this exile, it's not just punishment, it's a deliberate, rigorous spiritual discipline.
And a discipline aimed at one thing.
Guaranteed restoration.
Yeah, that's the challenging part. The source basically says that when God's people start to drift away, from their identity or their purpose, he sometimes allows them to be carried into a place of real distance and discomfort.
A Babylon, so to speak.
By Babylon, exactly. But that allowance, paradoxically, is actually the first step in a pre-planned blueprint for them to come back. And to come back much stronger.
It just completely reframes the whole narrative, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It goes from being a tragedy to a corrective strategy.
It does.
So we're going to extract the surprising insights on how God uses this concept of distance to, and I'm quoting here, wake us up, raise us up, and bring us back into his purpose. We have 5 key points to get through.
And the first one really tackles the most important question. How does this state of exile even begin? We tend to focus on the external stuff,
The
right?
Assyrian army, the Babylonian siege.
Exactly. But the source makes this very strong, very counterintuitive claim that the actual process of deportation, it never starts externally.
Which is so provocative. You want to blame the invader or the circumstances, the market crash, the unexpected loss, whatever it is.
Right.
But the source insists that the real mechanism of separation, spiritual exile, begins right here in the heart.
That's it. The historical deportation of Israel into Assyria and Babylon, the one that's mentioned in 2 Kings, that was just the physical symptom of a spiritual reality that had already taken hold.
So what was that internal drift? The source is very specific about it.
Oh, very. It details the spiritual decline. They had fallen completely into idolatry, that they were assimilating with the cultures around them,
Just mixing with the world, as the text puts it.
and actively ignoring the core commandments of their covenant with God. The argument is honestly quite powerful. They were mentally and spiritually in Babylon long before Nebuchadnezzar's army ever showed up.
So their distance from God was a self-imposed exile first. The physical captivity was just the painful diagnosis.
That's a great way to put it.
But if this was all a result of their own failure, why didn't God just wash his hands of them? I mean, why is it corrective discipline and not just final judgment?
And that is the crucial distinction the source works so hard to make. It says this was not done because God rejected them. It was done because he loved them enough to intervene,
To correct them.
to correct them. If you let idolatry and compromise just fester, it destroys the soul. The source uses this really powerful phrase. It says, sometimes God lets you lose something to save your soul.
Wow.
He removes the comfortable homeland to force a restoration of character that just wasn't going to happen otherwise. The external displacement was a spiritual necessity.
That reframes any period of loss we face, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It moves it from just punishment to a kind of targeted corrective intervention. And here's where it gets, for me, really interesting. The next point addresses this huge paradox of being in captivity, God's presence.
Right. Because if the goal was abandonment, you'd think God would just stay behind in Jerusalem,
Of course, that's his house.
But the source explicitly proves that God did not stay behind. He walked with his people right into Babylon.
And this idea, this presence in the middle of displacement, that's the key to surviving it. The source gives 3 incredible stories to prove he's there right in the foreign land.
The first one is Ezekiel. The source really focuses on this image of the prophet receiving these profound visions, not in the Holy Temple,
But where?
by the river Shabar, a major canal in Babylon. So by showing Ezekiel the heavenly throne room and his own glory thousands of miles away from the sanctuary, God was immediately debunking the idea that he was tied to a specific place.
That's fascinating. It's a moment of like theological liberation for the captives.
Yeah.
God is essentially saying, my presence, my power, they're not dependent on your comfort zone or your success or even the physical temple.
Yeah.
I am here with you in the land of your displacement.
Exactly. And that same divine presence is what allowed Daniel, right in the heart of Babylonian politics, to keep his identity, to maintain his prayer life.
3 times a day.
3 times a day, under threat of death. He wasn't hiding, he was operating at the center of global power. And then you have Esther. Her entire story of saving her people unfolds while she is literally the queen in the Persian Empire.
So they weren't just getting by. They weren't just surviving. They were thriving and influencing these powerful pagan empires.
Precisely because God was present, using their displacement as a platform. The message is pretty clear. Even if you feel like life has deported you into a situation you never asked for, that promise in Isaiah still stands. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you.
The foreign land becomes the training ground.
Which brings us right to point 3. If God is actively present in that foreign land, then the exile isn't just about passive endurance.
Right.
It's a phase of intense spiritual training. So what's the curriculum? What is he trying to accomplish in all that discomfort?
And the source insists the main purpose is a spiritual reckoning, a wake-up call. When Israel was forced into the discomfort of Babylon, all the noise and distractions of home, they just disappeared.
Then they cried out to God again. They finally remembered their true spiritual identity.
They realized their priorities had gotten completely upside down.
The comfort and safety of Jerusalem had, in a way, let them get spiritually lazy. But this foreign place, it forced a painful but vital shift. The source notes that in exile, quote, idols fall.
All of a sudden, the temporary, fleeting nature of the world is exposed.
And you're forced to confront the fact that, you know what? This world is not your home.
It's the ultimate reality check. The pride that led to that internal drift in the first place gets broken. I think that's the core theological point here. Discipline forces humility, but humility is what restores the connection.
It does. The text points to Jeremiah 24, and it's this remarkable promise made to the exiles. It says, I will set my eyes on them for good, and I will give them a heart to know me.
So their stubbornness was broken, but their prayer life was restored.
Yes. The whole process is designed to humble them so that God can lift them higher and restore a real relationship, one based on true knowledge, not just cultural habit.
That's the transformative power of it. But here's the part that gives so much hope in the middle of all that discipline, is restoration. It isn't just a hopeful guess.
No.
The source is adamant that it was pre-planned. Which brings us to point 4, the scheduled comeback.
Yes. This is so crucial for the whole framework. The source claims God already planned the comeback, and he set a specific expiration date for their deliverance.
Even before the temple fell.
Even before the temple fell, and that moves the whole experience out of the realm of random tragedy and into deliberate divine strategy.
And the most famous reference for this fixed schedule, it's in Jeremiah 29.
Verses 10 through 14. God sets the timeline for the Babylonian captivity at exactly 70 years. He promises, after 70 years, I will bring you back.
And then he says, you will seek me and find me.
Yes, then you will call upon me and go and pray to me, and I will listen to you.
Think about the certainty that provides to a captive people. Their exile wasn't open-ended.
It had a season, a countdown timer built right into the divine decree.
The same God who allowed the displacement, who allowed the correction, was the God who guaranteed their return.
And historically, we see the absolute fulfillment of that prophecy. Israel returned home under the decree of Cyrus, the temple was rebuilt, the walls were restored, and the nation was, in a sense, spiritually reborn. It was purged of the very idolatry that had started the whole drift in the first place.
This historical certainty is what provides the core takeaway, that the source just hammers home for you, the listener.
Your exile has an expiration date.
And just as important, what God restores always comes back stronger. The strength of that restored nation, having learned its lessons, was more resilient than the nation before the fall.
The displacement was temporary, it was strategic, it wasn't the end of their story at all.
It was a mandatory detour.
Exactly, to build resilience and deep faith before the ultimate return.
It's a really powerful framework for understanding any period of difficulty you might be in right now.
It truly is. It lets us see any period of loss as a detour, not a final destination.
But the source doesn't just stop with ancient Israel. It zooms out. It shifts to the overarching theological climax in point 5.
The ending of the ultimate exile.
Yes. So if we pull back from the history of just one nation, the source asks the inevitable question, what was the greatest exile of all time?
And the answer isn't a physical deportation. It's humanity's separation from God caused by sin. That initial spiritual distance in the Garden of Eden was the original, the total deportation from God's presence.
And that distance required the ultimate restoration agent. This is where the whole narrative pivots, because Jesus came, as the source says, not to deport us, but to bring us home.
He is the solution to the ultimate distance. He takes on the role of the ultimate restorer.
And how does he do it? The mechanism for our return.
It's explained so clearly in passages like Ephesians 2:13. You who once were far off have been brought near by the blood of Christ.
The source explains that Jesus took on the total distance, the entire burden of exile and punishment, right there on the cross. He became the definition of separated.
So that we could return home. So that humanity could enter a permanent state of restored presence.
It's the conclusion of the whole argument. I mean, if God guaranteed the return of a rebellious nation after 70 years because of a historical covenant,
how much more certain is the restoration guaranteed by the covenant established through Christ?
this just broadens the application immensely for you, the listener. It means this entire framework discipline leading to guaranteed scheduled restoration. It applies far beyond ancient history.
Absolutely. The source finishes by applying this metaphor to any feeling of displacement we encounter today. You might feel deported emotionally from peace or spiritually from your purpose.
Relationally through conflict, financially through loss, even mentally through anxiety.
But the overarching principle remains the same.
God disciplines to restore. God humbles to elevate. God breaks the old structure so he can rebuild a new one.
It's a structure that assures you your comeback is already in motion, that your return to purpose is guaranteed, just like he guaranteed the return from Babylon.
So the core insight we've synthesized from this source material is this. These periods of displacement, of distance or suffering, even if they're caused by our own drifting, they're seen theologically as corrective phases.
And they have a guaranteed scheduled endpoint. Restoration isn't just a hopeful prayer, it's a certainty driven by divine love and by pre-planning.
And that leaves us with a really profound final thought for you to mull over. Reflect on the source's ultimate declaration. What God restores always comes back stronger.
Think about the last time you felt truly deported. A career failure, a relational breakdown, a big financial setback. Did you see it as a final judgment or as a temporary mandatory detour?
If you look at that experience, whether it's past or present, through the lens of this source, what kind of strength or clarity or new purpose is being forged in you right now?
That simply could not have developed if you had stayed comfortable in your Jerusalem.
The ultimate insight here is that displacement might hurt, but according to this source, it's rarely useless. So embrace the necessary breaking, knowing that the source promises, I may have been carried away, but I will come back stronger. Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are getting into one of the most powerful and frankly terrifying images in all of prophetic literature.
Your red horse.
The red horse, from the second seal of Revelation. It's just this immediate picture of war, of chaos.
Exactly. It's an image that's synonymous with global catastrophe, the complete unraveling of, well, everything. And it's been that way for centuries. But we want to look at how a modern theological interpretation grapples with it.
Right, and that's our mission for this deep dive. We're looking at a pretty extensive source, a full sermon, really, that focuses entirely on Revelation chapter 6, verses 3 and 4. And we're going to unpack its view on global conflict, not as some ancient myth, but as a prophetic reality that they believe is unfolding.
Mm-hmm. And the core text is what drives everything. It's short, but it is incredibly potent. Another horse, fiery red, went out, and it was granted to the one who sat on it to take peace from the earth, and that people should kill one another, and there's given to him a great sword.
And the interpretation we're analyzing is so clear on this point. This isn't just, confusing symbolism. The author actually calls it a prophetic reality, a vision given to prepare the church for the final days.
For a world where peace is deliberately taken away.
And humanity just turns on itself. It's incredibly bleak.
It is, but what's really important to establish right up front, and what the source itself stresses, is the goal. The sermon says its purpose is not to create fear or sensationalism. The stated intent is awakening.
Awakening, not fear.
Right. The argument is if God reveals these things, it's for preparation, for understanding, not for panic. And that whole framework, preparation versus fear, it really dictates every single point they make.
Okay, so let's jump right in then, because the first thing that really struck me was how the red horse even appears. It doesn't just, show up out of nowhere.
No, not at all. And that's the first major point the source hammers home. Let's call it divine judgment and control. The red horse is only released when the Lamb, who is Jesus Christ, opens the second seal.
So it's a controlled event.
It is a controlled mechanism, absolutely.
That detail alone completely changes the meaning, doesn't it? It moves it away from being just random chaos or some geopolitical accident. If the Lamb is the one opening the seal, what's the big takeaway from that? What does the source say that means for the nature of war?
The argument is that this specific catastrophic war is not random. It's not Satan just deciding to act on his own, and it's not even purely human foolishness. This interpretation defines the seal judgments as divine decisions.
Divine decisions, wow.
Yeah. So the release of the red horse is presented as God's specific, controlled judgment on a world that has, in their view, rejected him.
That is a huge theological claim. So if God is the one opening the seal that brings war, how does the source square that, that severity with a merciful God?
They focus on sovereignty. The interpretation basically says, this sequence proves that God is in complete control of the timeline, even of these incredibly destructive end-time events. War becomes an orchestrated part of a divine calendar. And the purpose of knowing that, they argue, is to give assurance to the believer, even when the world outside is falling apart.
So it's less about the chaos and more about who's ultimately in charge of that chaos.
Exactly. It's about divine sovereignty, which, you'd need that assurance given what the horse is sent to do.
Which brings us to its main job, the removal of peace. The text says, it was granted to him to take peace from the earth.
And this is another point the source really zeroes in on. The word take, or remove. This is not peace slowly eroding over time.
Right, it's an action.
It's an active withdrawal. They describe it as peace being literally lifted from the planet, a specific, almost spiritual act that fundamentally changes the global atmosphere overnight.
So like a spiritual restraint is taken away, and the result is immediate physical chaos. What does the source say the fallout from that looks like?
Exponential instability. Yes, nations, fighting nations for sure, but it's the pervasive atmosphere of violence that defines it. They describe a cascade effect, civil unrest, major uprisings, a total loss of stability globally.
The removal of peace is the trigger.
It's the trigger for the world to start devouring itself.
But, people say wars and rumors of wars have always been with us. How does this interpretation make this Red Horse event different from, say, any other period of human conflict?
They connect it right back to Jesus' prophecy in Matthew 24, where he mentions wars and rumors of wars. But they argue that the active removal of peace by divine decree, that elevates this beyond anything in history. The world will experience war like never before because the very thing that held our worst impulses in check has been taken away.
An acceleration beyond our control.
Yes. And that brings us to maybe the most chilling part of the analysis, the difference between nations fighting and the next phrase.
Societal collapse.
Yeah.
That people should kill one another.
Right. And for this source, that phrase means the judgment goes so much deeper than just armies and borders. This is society collapsing from the inside out, pure anarchy.
Can you give me some of the examples they use?
Mm-hmm.
Because that sounds personal. It sounds like more than just war.
It is. They paint these terrifyingly intimate pictures. We're talking about civil wars erupting everywhere, major cities becoming battlegrounds, communities tearing themselves apart over ideology, and maybe the most disturbing part, families being violently divided against each other.
So the breakdown isn't just governmental, it's relational. It's your neighbor, your family.
Exactly. It's violence spreading like a social disease because the most fundamental human bonds have just disintegrated. The source presents this as the ultimate picture of humanity without God's restraining grace. It's savagery, and that internal implosion is what sets this period apart.
Which leads to the final piece of the text, the thing that ties all this localized violence back to the global scale, the great sword.
Yeah, and there was given to him a great sword. And the source is insistent that this isn't just symbolic of any old weapon. The word great is key. They see it as indicating massive, large-scale military conflict defined by its sheer destructive power.
So in a modern sense, what does a great sword mean to them?
World war, but on a scale we've never seen. Widespread death, advanced weaponry, modern technology used to maximize devastation across entire nations. It's not a fight over a border, it's global.
So this is absolutely not limited warfare.
No, this is total global conflict. They see the full release of the Red Horse as one of the great judgments designed to completely dismantle the current world order, to prepare the stage for the rise of the Antichrist and what they call the tribulation.
Okay, so this is where the listener is probably thinking about the news today. How does the source connect this to current events? Mm-hmm. They say don't set dates, but they also say watch the signs.
Mm-hmm. And this is the distinction they make between the full event and what they call birth pains today. The sermon identifies what we see now, all the global tension and conflict, as the shatters of the Red Horse, not the horse itself at full gallop.
The tremor before the earthquake. So what specific things do they point to as these warning signs?
They list a few trends that you'll probably recognize.
Okay.
The constant cycle of wars and threats, that heightened global tension, terrorism, political instability, increasing hatred between groups, and what they call lawlessness multiplying in cities.
So these are all just rumblings.
Yeah.
Leading toward the main event.
Exactly. They'd say the birth pains are getting closer and more intense, but the full orchestrated judgment of the Red Horse, where peace is actively taken, that's still to come during the tribulation itself. They're telling their audience, the signs are here, but the real event is yet to come.
And understanding that brings us to the application part of it all. The source says this is all for preparation, not for entertainment.
That is the absolute central message. God reveals this, they argue, not to make people hide in a bunker, but to make them prepare spiritually. They contrast the world's reaction panic, fear, with how a believer should react.
Let not your heart be troubled.
That's the one. The ultimate contrast is the external chaos versus the internal anchor. The world is destined to lose peace, but the believer is meant to have the peace that passes all understanding.
And that internal peace is the defense against the Red Horse, essentially.
And it is. It's their theological stability in the face of all this violence.
So given that urgency, what are the specific actions they call for? What is the call to readiness?
The source gets very specific here, driven by this idea that time is short. They list several actions. People need to wake up, repent, live holy lives, preach the gospel with new urgency, walk in the Spirit, and just stay watchful, stay ready.
So the Red Horse isn't just some future event to watch for. It's interpreted as an immediate wake-up call to the church right now.
That's the entire point of the sermon. The severity of what's coming is used to motivate immediate spiritual change.
So when we pull this all together, the divine control, the removal of peace, the societal breakdown, the great sword, What's the final conclusion the source offers its listeners?
It circles right back to the beginning. To control, yes, the judgments are terrifying. But the source emphasizes that Jesus is still the lamb and he's still the king. He's the one opening the seals. He controls the timing. And ultimately, he's victorious.
So the final takeaway is that contrast. The world gets war and the great sword.
But believers get Jesus, the Prince of Peace. And they remind the audience that it's not just peace, it's also power. Believers stand with the Lord of hosts, the God of heaven's armies, secure on the rock of ages, even as the world shakes apart.
And the source is really clear. The rising intensity of global conflict is, for them, an undeniable sign that the return of Jesus is getting closer. The red horse is Exhibit A.
It is, and that leaves a pretty powerful question for you, the listener, to think about based entirely on this interpretation we've explored. If the current shadows, the political breakdown, the endless conflicts, the social division, if those really are the birth pains leading up to this red horse judgment, what does that mean for how you should approach preparation and vigilance today? If the call is to wake up because time is short, how does that claim actually change anything for you right now?
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are undertaking a really fascinating deep dive that takes us right to the intersection of geology and profound theology.
It really does.
We're analyzing the symbolism of jewels found throughout Scripture. We're talking diamonds, rubies, sapphires, all of them, not just as decoration, but as teaching tools.
It's astonishing how deeply woven these materials are into the foundational texts. I mean, they show up everywhere. Creation, the law, prophetic visions.
Even in descriptions of God himself.
Exactly. They aren't just details. They carry this deep structural meaning.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission here is to uncover the mystery, maybe the prophecy, behind the use of these precious stones. The central argument we found in the source material is that God created them not just for beauty, but to reveal his glory.
And just as importantly, to express the immense value he places on his people.
That idea of a value system is key.
It's the core takeaway, really. The analysis we looked at breaks this down into, I think, 5 core concepts these gems represent. God's glory, his holiness, the unbreakable nature of his covenant.
It's value for people, you mentioned that.
Right, and finally, the reality of the eternal kingdom.
That is a staggering amount of meaning to pull from something you just, dig out of the ground.
Yeah.
So let's start where Scripture starts with them, revealing divine glory.
Okay, so we have to look at the function of jewels as reflectors of divinity. The argument is that before a human ever even touched a gemstone, they were created to declare God's majesty.
So it starts with God, not with us.
It has to. If we accept the idea that God is light, then the physical properties of a flawless, brilliant jewel make it the perfect mirror for that light.
Wait, hold on. If God is light and jewels just reflect light, doesn't that make them kind of secondary?
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything in the sources that argues they have their own intrinsic power, not just as a metaphor?
That's a critical question. And no, the material doesn't suggest they possess some kind of internal divinity. Instead, it highlights their physical perfection as the closest possible analogy to God's spiritual flawlessness. Think about it this way. What makes a jewel so brilliant isn't just that it reflects light, it's how it refracts and splits it into a spectrum of pure color.
Like a prism.
Exactly like a prism. A flawless diamond takes in simple white light and just explodes it into a rainbow. The argument is that this physical perfection, this ability to perfectly display the complexity of light, is why God chose them.
That connects directly to some of the scripture we see.
Absolutely. Look at Ezekiel 28, where the prophet describes stones like sapphire, emerald, and diamond, basically, covering or being part of the divine environment. They're like heavenly building blocks.
And then, maybe most powerfully, is Revelation 4, which describes the one on the throne as looking like a jasper and a sardius stone.
God is literally choosing jewels to describe himself because, well, what else in our universe is more radiant or structurally pure? Their brilliance is the closest earthly analogy to his glory.
So we've established this idea of divine reflection. But how does the narrative shift from describing God's appearance to defining his relationship with humanity?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. We move from the throne of God in heaven to the high priest on earth, carrying out divine law.
The high priest's breastplate.
Yes, from Exodus 28. It's this remarkable piece of ceremonial wear with 12 stones, all precisely set.
And that precision is key, isn't it?
It's everything. Each of those 12 stones represented one of the 12 tribes of Israel, but the deeper meaning is in the medium. I mean, why not engrave the names on bronze or wood.
Why jewels?
The analysis we reviewed argued that God was showing three things here. My people are precious, my covenant is unbreakable, and my order is perfect. Precisely. A jewel is set in gold, it's protected, it's incredibly hard to break. So when the high priest entered the Holy of Holies, he carried the tribes as these valuable protected stones over his heart.
Wow, so their names were literally carried into God's presence on the most valuable materials known at the time.
It symbolized the permanence and the value of that commitment.
The sources also connect these stones to the Urim and Thummim, right? The tools for decision making.
That's a crucial insight. While the texts aren't always explicit that the Urim and Thummim were specific gems, the fact that they were used with the brilliant breastplate suggests a connection. Divine judgment needed to be reflected perfectly.
Just as the stone reflects light perfectly.
You got it. The material itself helps communicate divine order. It's not just a symbol of glory anymore. It's become this active, functional piece of the covenant relationship.
Okay, let's dig into some specific stones because they all seem to carry their own theological weight. Let's start with the emerald.
The emerald. It introduces the color green, which is a bit startling when you're thinking of fiery reds and golds for divinity. But in Revelation 4, right after describing God's glory, it says there was a rainbow around the throne in appearance like an emerald.
A green rainbow, that's a powerful image. It speaks of stability, not just a fleeting arc of light.
It is, and the significance of that green color, the color of life, of growth, of renewal, is just profound. It represents eternal renewal and God's everlasting mercy.
So if the area right around the throne is saturated with the color of life, what does that say about God's rule?
It signifies that everything coming from God, his rule, his judgment, his very being, is inherently life-giving. It's life-restoring and life-sustaining forever. It puts God's mercy right at the center of his being, visible as this unending emerald hue.
Okay, so from life and mercy, let's jump to the other end of the spectrum, strength and permanence. Let's talk about the diamond.
The diamond. It's used to illustrate God's absolute consistency and strength, and the sources really emphasize its formation. Diamonds need immense heat, intense pressure, and a lot of time to turn simple carbon into something flawless.
The process itself is the point.
The process is the whole metaphor. The diamond's very existence is a testament to unyielding pressure. That's why in Ezekiel 3, the prophet is told his forehead should be as hard as diamond.
So it's not just about being strong.
No, it's about being forged through trial. God uses the diamond to illustrate really three things: his unchangeable nature, his unshakable word, and his unbreakable promises.
And he could have chosen iron or stone, but he chose the one thing that is structurally the most resistant to change.
Exactly. And the takeaway for the listener is powerful. Just as a diamond can't be easily broken, neither can the word of God, and neither can the one who stands on that word. It's the ultimate metaphor for spiritual durability.
We've only touched on two, but the sheer spectrum of colored stones in Scripture seems to point to God's multifaceted nature.
Yes, the spectrum of grace. The sources really urge us not to overlook the weight of the other colors. For example, ruby and sapphire.
Let's start with ruby. It's that fierce red.
Or sardius in some older texts. And the theological weight of a red stone is just inescapable. It represents sacrifice, blood, cost of the covenant. It's one of the gems used to describe the throne in Revelation, and it's the very first stone on the high priest's breastplate.
A constant reminder of sacrifice.
A constant, visible reminder. And then you have the sapphire, that heavenly blue, that feels like a whole different dimension.
Yeah, it does.
The blue of the sapphire is always linked to the sky, to the heavenly realm, and to the authority of God's law. In Exodus, when Moses and the elders see God, it says under his feet was something like a paved work of a sapphire stone.
So while ruby speaks of the price of the relationship, sapphire speaks of the purity of it, the clarity of God's wisdom.
Unclouded truth. That's it. And the spectrum keeps going. Amethyst for royalty, topaz for glory. The synthesis is that just like a jewel has many facets, God's grace has many dimensions. Mercy, power, forgiveness, strength.
Which brings us right back to the listener. How does all this symbolism, the pressure, the light, the cost, connect to a person's value today?
The transition is really beautiful because it's a specific promise. The analysis points us to Malachi 3.17. They shall be mine on the day that I make my jewels.
He calls his people his jewel.
His jewel.
And that distinction is vital. Not his rock, not his metal. The jewel is refined, it's valuable, radiant, chosen.
And it acknowledges the process, which can be painful. The listener might feel like a rough, dusty stone right now, but the material emphasizes that God is actively shaping them. This is the purification by fire, the shaping through pressure,
That's right.
and transformation until they shine with the character of Christ. The incredible effort it takes to form a flawless diamond is the very measure of the value God places on that process in you.
That puts a divine price tag on every single person. So, to conclude, let's look forward. Let's look at prophecy, the culmination of this whole theme in the New Jerusalem.
The vision of the eternal home is really the final statement on value. Revelation 21 describes the foundations of the holy city as being decorated and actually built with 12 precious stones: jasper, sapphire, emerald. The list just goes on.
So the very foundations of the kingdom are built with glory. What's the implication of that? I mean, a foundation made of jewels.
The implication is permanence, expense, and perfection. Building a city on a foundation of gems that kings on earth only dream of touching. It signifies ultimate value and durability. It's a guarantee that our eternal home is beautiful beyond measure and that God's people will shine like jewels forever in a place made to celebrate that.
It brings us full circle. This deep dive shows these aren't just pretty rocks. They're theological markers. They remind us we're unbreakable in Christ like diamonds.
We carry eternal life like emeralds.
We reflect heaven's clarity like sapphires.
And we remember the cost like rubies. The whole value system is laid out right there in the stones.
So the final thought for you today builds on this. God doesn't just see a rough stone when he looks at you. He sees the jewel he is forming, the geology, the pressure, the time. It all reveals the effort and value he places on your transformation. So the question to reflect on is this. Which specific facet of God's grace, the sapphire's wisdom, the emerald's mercy, or the diamond's strength, do you need to actively reflect most brightly today?
An incredibly rich set of insights, all drawn from the stones right beneath our feet.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. So have you ever been reading through scripture and just, stop to think about the colors?
Yeah.
That they might not just be for decoration.
Oh, absolutely. It's easy to gloss over them, but they're often carrying this hidden weight, a prophetic message even.
Right, and that's what we're digging into today. We all know the four horsemen from Revelation 6, white, red, black, and pale. But our sources are suggesting there's another major power at play, one symbolized by a single color, purple.
Exactly. We're shifting from the literal to the metaphorical here. There is no verse that says, and a purple horse came forth.
Okay.
But the argument is that purple as a symbol is so consistent across the entire Bible, so tied to power, royalty, and corruption, that it effectively represents a massive end-time system.
A system that stands in opposition to God's true reign.
Yes, a system that claims authority for itself.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Our mission for this deep dive is to really get into that duality of purple and see how it shines a light on these corrupt political and religious powers in prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get to the whole horse metaphor, what are the, say, four main things that purple represents to sort of set the stage?
Well, first and foremost, it's royalty and authority, no question. Then, building on that, it's immense wealth and luxury.
Okay, so power and money.
Right. Then you have the spiritual side. It signifies priestly power, the kind you see mandated in the Old Testament law. But then there's the flip side, the one that's key for prophecy: corrupt kingdoms and worldly seduction.
And that tension, that's where the drama is.
That's where all the prophetic drama lies. We have to keep those four ideas in our heads as we go.
It's a stunning contradiction. How can one color mean something so holy and then on the worst of worldly corruption?
Well, the fascinating thing is it practical economics, really.
Economics.
Yeah. In the ancient world, purple dye, specifically Tyrian purple, wasn't just expensive, it was almost priceless. It came from the mucus of thousands upon thousands of tiny sea snails.
You're kidding. So to dye one robe.
You'd need a monumental effort. Cost was astronomical, so it immediately became a symbol of exclusivity.
So it wasn't just a status symbol, it was the status symbol. Like
Yeah.
you're walking around draped in something rarer than gold.
Exactly. Only an emperor, a king, the highest of the high could afford it. And we see that used in a positive way at first.
In righteous rule.
Right. In Judges, you see leaders wearing purple garments as a sign of their noble victory. But the best example is probably Mordecai in the book of Esther. When he's elevated to high office, he's clothed in purple. It's a sign of righteous political authority given by God.
Okay, so that establishes the legitimate positive use.
Yeah.
But then comes the shift. That same symbol of wealth becomes a sign of, well, moral rot.
That's the turn. When that wealth gets detached from morality, it becomes the seat of corruption, and the sources point us straight to the parables for that.
The rich man.
The rich man in Luke 16, absolutely. He was clothed in purple and fine linen, living in luxury every day. The purple there isn't about God-given authority.
No, it's about self-indulgence. Worldly power that looks successful but is, at its core, opposing God's righteousness.
Precisely. And that brings us to the spiritual context, which is where this gets even more intense.
Because on one hand, purple was one of God's colors, wasn't it? It was literally mandated for the tabernacle, for the veil. Mandated. Exodus 26, it's right there. And it was woven into the holy garments for the priests. It was meant to signify the very presence of God, holiness, true worship.
Which makes the mockery of it so much more devastating.
It's the ultimate twisting of a sacred symbol. When the Roman soldiers take Jesus, the true king, they deliberately put a purple robe on him. They twist a crown of thorns and put it on his head.
They're using the very symbol of imperial and priestly power to mock his claim to it.
Yes, the ultimate false imitation.
So the big takeaway here is that purple is this incredibly dualistic symbol. It's either genuine, holy authority from God, or it's a corrupt, deceptive imitation of it.
And that duality is the engine that drives its prophetic meaning. Okay, but I have to stop you there because I think a lot of people listening will have this question. If the purple horse isn't literally in Revelation with the other four, why call it a horse at all? Are we just adding to the text?
That is a crucial question because we can't add to scripture. The purple horse is, you're right, a conceptual metaphor.
Okay.
The term horse is used to represent the same idea as the other four, a powerful, unstoppable, world-altering force or system. The four horses bring judgment, conquest, war, famine, death. The purple horse symbolizes the overarching system that allows them to ride.
Ah, I see. It's the platform, the governing structure of deception and power that those other judgments operate on.
You got it. It's the foundation.
So what does this system, this purple horse, actually represent prophetically?
Yeah.
For someone who's not deep into these studies, how would you define it?
It symbolizes the rise of a global kingdom, a system of human authority that wants total control, not just over nations, but over commerce, resources, even what people believe.
And this is where we get the connection to the beast in Revelation 13.
That's the conceptual link, yes. The beast system is that final global political and economic power that demands total allegiance. It controls who can buy and sell. Purple is the perfect symbol for that system's seduction.
Seduction.
The seduction of wealth, of luxury, of what looks like invincible political power. It's this huge global machine that tries to replace God's authority with its own.
And this is where it gets really terrifying.
Yeah.
Because purple signifies both royal political power and priestly religious power. So the purple horse isn't just one or the other. It's the unholy union of the two.
The synthesis.
Right.
It's governmental control blended with financial domination and, crucially, religious deception. Power masking itself as piety.
And that combination leads directly to.
Mystery Babylon. The absolute embodiment of worldly seduction and opposition to Christ's kingdom.
And the sources give us that chillingly specific detail in Revelation 17, verse 4, that just locks it in. Mystery Babylon is described as a woman.
Clothed in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, precious stones, and pearls.
That's not a description meant to scare you with some monster. It's a warning about something that looks beautiful, stable, even holy.
Absolutely. The warning is the facade. Because underneath all that glamour, the system is proud, it's deceptive, it's drunk on its own power, and it opposes true believers.
It's a counterfeit kingdom.
A counterfeit kingdom, challenging God's kingship, using the very symbols of prestige that he first ordained.
Okay, this has been incredibly insightful. Let's pivot now. Let's bring this from ancient texts and prophecy into today. For you, the listener, why does any of this symbolism matter right now?
It matters profoundly because these purple systems aren't just a future thing. The sources are clear that they are rising now. We see them in financial empires and political alliances, even in religious organizations that seek worldly power over faithfulness.
So there are lessons for us. What's the first one?
The first, and maybe the most important, is discernment. We have to learn to see past the attractive facade.
To look past the purple cloak.
Exactly. To identify these corrupt systems that are cloaked in the purple of authority and prestige. It means you can't just trust something because it's powerful or wealthy or traditional.
So what do?
We do what 1 John 4 tells us. Test the spirits to see whether they are from God. You have to ask the hard question. Does this institution, political or religious, serve itself and its own power, or does it humbly serve the true king?
That's a hard question to ask because these systems often promise comfort and prosperity, which I guess leads to the second lesson, faithfulness.
Yes. The primary temptation of the purple system is to seduce you, to get you to join for the comfort, for the security, for the prestige. It offers you the world if you'll just give it your allegiance.
And the counter to that
Is the command in Revelation 3, hold fast what you have so that no one may take your crown. Our faithfulness is measured by our willingness to reject worldly power when it comes at the cost of righteousness.
So it means standing outside the glamorous system even when it's uncomfortable.
Even then,
Yeah.
especially then.
Okay, so we discern the deception, we remain faithful. The third lesson has to be about our response. It has to be active.
It does, and that response is prayer and intercession. We can't be passive as these end time powers rise.
What does that prayer look like?
It's active prayer against the spiritual systems of greed and deception that hide under that authority. It's not just God protect me, it's God dismantle these systems, protect those who are being seduced by their glamour. It's praying for the strength to reject the very thing the world worships.
Centralized, wealthy, self-glorifying power.
Exactly.
This has been a really comprehensive deep dive. Let's just quickly summarize the 4 key takeaways for you listening. First, purple equals power, authority, wealth, and often corrupt spiritual influence.
Second, the purple horse is a prophetic symbol. It represents human systems that oppose God, built on that dangerous union of religious and political power.
Third, Mystery Babylon is literally clothed in purple. That's the ultimate warning sign of seduction and corruption. It's a call to look past appearances.
And fourth, our action plan. We have to respond with active discernment, radical faithfulness to Christ's humble way, and persistent prayer against these deceptive worldly systems.
Yeah. So for a final thought, we've spent this whole time talking about the temporary nature of earthly purple pride, this power that fades away.
And that's the key contrast. We have to remember that Christ's reign stands in complete eternal opposition to the fleeting power of the purple kingdom.
So when we're making decisions about where our allegiance lies,
You have to ask yourself, what garment are you seeking? Is it the temporary, costly purple of worldly seduction, or the durable, pure white of Christ's righteousness? The ultimate victory isn't found in controlling the world's wealth.
no.
The victory is in the enduring kingdom. Revelation 19 tells us that on his robe and on his thigh, he has a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. That's the only authority that lasts long after all the seductive purple empires of this world have faded to dust.
That's the last sermon. See you next time. Remember, I keep praying for you guys. I love you guys like a family. God bless you, YouTube family. Jesus is coming. Jesus is coming. Oh, yeah. I can't wait. Let's rock. Hit the like button and subscribe to YouTube channel. Thank you. Have a nice day. God bless. Jesus love you.